Do you ever reminisce on one of your favorite games from your childhood and think about how great it was? Only to go back and realize, oh no, this game is old and janky and kind of a piece of shit. The graphics look like somebody angrily smeared Vaseline over a CRT screen. The controls feel like a mix between trying to parallel park a shopping cart full of bricks and piloting a broken forklift on quicksand. The camera's spinning around like a drunk Beyblade. The resolution's all stretched out and looks like shit on your modern screen. And those rose-tinted glasses you've been wearing, they're gone. Shattered into a million pieces and reduced to dust.
I'm going to have to cut it short.
10 minutes after playing whatever certified hood classic you decided to boot up, you're sitting there wondering if your childhood was actually full of joy from playing these games or if it was just a fever dream. But then, like a miracle raining down from gaming heaven, here comes the modern remake announcement. Now that game's in 4K or 1440p at 120 Hz or 2860 by 7420 or whatever. It's buttery smooth and amazing is what I'm trying to say. The controls are fixed, the mechanics are polished, and they've even added a little bit of extra content too. And that little voice in your head starts to convince you that it's going to be just like the good old days, but better. And there are times when that voice is correct, and when that happens, life is good. But sometimes that voice is very, very wrong. I'm still pissed off about this. So today we're diving into video game remakes, why they happen, why they succeed or fail, if they're a good thing, and whether or not we're paying for quality recreations or watered down nostalgia bait. Let's go ahead and be honest, nostalgia is a major cheat code for modern video game sales. When you decide to buy one of these remakes of your old favorites, you're not just paying for the newest updated version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. What you're really buying is childhood you doing kickflips over a police car in your childhood bedroom, while the song Superman by Goldfinger blasts in the background, pumping you up like a goddamn divine hymn. What remakes are really selling you is a feeling or a vibe. And I'm more than happy to buy into that because who the hell doesn't want to revisit 1999?
It's just one of those days, feel like a freight train. First one to the plane, leaves with a bloodstains.
Remakes tap into that memory, that feeling of magic that we all once felt when playing earlier games. A feeling of wonder and of being so bad at games that you had to go and call the Nintendo helpline number using your family's landline for help beating Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, and got in trouble for racking up a massive phone bill. But it's not just about the nostalgic emotions, remakes upgrade stuff. Or at least they're supposed to. A lot of old games were ambitious, but they really just didn't have that juice. Why did I write juice there? That doesn't make any sense. Either the tech wasn't there to fully meet the game's potential, the controls were limited by having just one hard plastic analog stick on a weirdly phallic midsection, or their mechanics and gameplay weren't fully realized or left room for improvement. And on the note of upgrades, let's shine a light on some examples of remakes that actually did this well. Take the Dead Space remake. They didn't just polish up the Ishimura with a fresh coat of Sherwin-Williams semi-gloss paint and call it a day. Instead, they completely overhauled the game's atmosphere, made the dismemberment even more fun and gruesome, and cranked the terror all the way up to 11. And overall, fans consider this remake to be the definitive version of the Dead Space experience. Personally, I still scream in terror like a small child during both versions, so it makes no difference to me. On a similar note, the Resident Evil 2 remake showed us that you can take a game with controls that made you feel both like a drunken tank operator and had zombies that make Minecraft's version look like an Avatar movie, and turn it into a masterclass in survival horror gaming. New over-the-shoulder aiming that made every headshot feel nice and crispy. Those previously pixelated, blocky monstrosities became terrifyingly detailed, reacting to every bullet, every knife stab, and every grenade that you accidentally threw into the wall and back at yourself. They were able to take a game that had already made me shit my pants as a child and make that magic happen all over again as an adult. The only difference is that this time I had my RGB gaming diaper on. And let's not forget about the recent Final Fantasy VII remake. Jesus, was that already 5 years ago? Taking a coveted and legendary turn-based RPG and making it into a modern action RPG with exciting new combat and graphics that make your eyes water. Square Enix was able to take this beloved game and turn it into something awesome that could be enjoyed by both new fans and old fans of the original game. And on that note, accessibility from older titles matters a lot too. And when done right, remakes bridge that gap from past to present, letting both old and new fans enjoy games in a newly realized way with a fresh take. And when this is done right, it often results in a new version that is in some ways debatably better than the original experience. But obviously, it's not always all sunshine and remastered rainbows, because sometimes remakes can really shit the bed. And this is the part where I talk about how some game remakes can come across like a sad attempt at a cash grab. Those definitive editions that somehow end up looking and playing way worse than the original. The textures are all slapped on like a landlord special when you move into a new place and everything is just coated in 10 layers of white paint. AI that just freaks out or runs into walls like it's been huffing galaxy gas all day. And then of course, gameplay that hasn't improved at all or is actually worse than the original. And I think we can all agree that these types of remakes suck big wang. And then there's the soul problem. No, not that soul. I'm talking about the soul of the game, the vibe, the charm. Things like the charming but kind of janky UI from the original version. The weird janky animations that ended up kind of feeling core to the game's identity. The weird voice acting that you ended up kind of liking.
Taste of my blade!
Bad remakes will oftentimes get rid of or gloss over these types of things, which leaves them giving off the impression of not really caring about the original version or understanding those certain quirks that people originally appreciated. And real quickly on that note too, if you're still confused or not totally clear, here's a quick montage of games that really have that soul factor. When a remake smooths over everything or leaves out those little details, it risks becoming sterile and an unfaithful recreation of the source material. Some bad remakes are visually beautiful, sure, but beneath that beauty is usually a lifeless husk devoid of any soul, kind of like anything released by Ubisoft.
I'll find out just over the hill.
And honestly, here's the main thing that bothers me about the idea of remakes in general. If developers are focused on making remakes, who's gonna make all the cool new good shit? We're like 1 or 2 remakes away from a world where every other release is gonna be a remake or like a Marvel game. Which might not be such a bad thing if they keep pumping out those Marvel Rivals skins. Am I right, fellas? Just kind of makes you think, if part of the gaming industry is so wrapped up in creating remakes, is that inhibiting the industry from moving forward and creating cool new IPs? Or are some of these companies gonna just keep submitting old homework and hoping that the teacher doesn't notice? So we've talked about the promise of remakes, that nostalgia whip it hit with a modern upgrade, but let's dive a little deeper and talk about that spectrum of quality that remakes can fall within. Let's go ahead and start with the good end, or what I like to call love letters. These are remakes that are faithful to the original while still adding enough to make them arguably better experiences. Like I already mentioned a little bit earlier, a shining example of a love letter remake, and one that understood the assignment, is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was trying to do a chef's kiss, but my hands are full. The Final Fantasy VII Remake did far more than just slapping a haircut and a fresh BBL on the original PS1 title. They were able to take the core narrative and the iconic characters that were so revered from the original, while tapping into that deep well of nostalgia, and modernize the gameplay with fast action-based combat, weapon upgrades, new spells and summons, totally revamped cutscenes, new beautiful graphics, bunch of stuff. The remake did a great job of expanding on the original and was able to dive deeper into the world of Midgar, allowing it to be fully realized instead of being held back by the original PS1 hardware. Unsurprisingly, the remake was super fun and a big success, and I can't wait to see what they have for Part 3. Final Fantasy VII Remake, folks. Great example of how to properly cash in on nostalgia, while realizing the original game's potential and working hard to deliver that experience to players. And now, let's go ahead and switch to the other side of the spectrum. I would consider any remake that falls within this section of the spectrum to either be a soulless cash grab or a broken piece of shit. Or in this example's case, both. And here it is, the poster child for a remake that flopped harder than a fully loaded Costco shaboing boing. It's none other than the infamous Warcraft 3 Reforged. Remember earlier when we were just talking about how remakes can lose the soul of the original game? Warcraft 3 Reforged is a textbook example of that. And the original Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne expansion are 2 games that I hold in very high esteem, okay? I would definitely put them in my top 3 games of all time just for the custom games alone. So back when this remake was originally announced, I just about went into cardiac arrest. Blizzard had painted this beautiful picture of this totally comprehensive remake that would go and update every facet of the original. Updated graphics, completely remade cinematics, updated story content and dialogue, a remastered UI, updated world editor, all kinds of stuff. And then we finally got it, and the execution was questionable at best. And I could make a whole nother video about this remaster, but essentially what they delivered was a Walmart great value version of the original game. And that's being nice. It looked worse, it was broken, the soul was completely stripped away, there was no new dialogue or voiceovers, cutscenes were laughably bad, the list goes on. It felt a lot less like a loving recreation and a lot more like something that was trying to capitalize on the Warcraft legacy. And I think it's a clear example of a remake that was totally motivated by profit, with very minimal intentions of actually giving players a better experience. And that brings us to this weird middle section of our remake spectrum of quality. Titles that end up here kind of just leave you scratching your head and wondering why the hell they were really made in the first place. And yes, I did create this category just so I could talk about the existence of The Last of Us Part 1 2022 remake. They already did one remaster of this game. I don't get it. And just to get ahead of it, I'm going to go ahead and out myself here. I am not the biggest The Last of Us fan. That being said, you can't ignore the fact that the original games did have some soul to them and they left a pretty significant cultural impact. But I will say that the PS4 remaster already did this game enough justice, so I ask again, why did they remake it? While it is a little bit prettier and updated for modern hardware, and there were some minor gameplay tweaks, couldn't that time have been better spent working on a new IP or something? I mean, what has Naughty Dog been up to lately? Oh shit. Did they remake this game again because of the TV show? When did the TV show come out? Okay, yeah, that tracks. Anyway, this remake sits in that weird middle ground. It's not offensively bad or anything, but its existence weirdly feels influenced by external factors and not really like it was meant to modernize a dated game. And now it's time to get philosophical. Time to strike that contemplative, holding your chin while sitting on the toilet pose. So why do remakes really exist? Is it because they're low-hanging nostalgia bait? Sometimes. Is it because they're safe? Definitely. Is it because publishers love money? Yes. As we already know and have talked about, there are games that deserve a good remake for one reason or another. Maybe they were limited by the hardware at the time, or the game's full vision wasn't able to come to fruition. But there's also the fact that games are really expensive to make and take a really long time to make. For certain studios, a well-done remake can help fill in those gaps. And apparently, yes, it does help bring money in so that studios can have that income to then use towards working on new IPs. And as we know, when remakes are done right, they can become works of art that triumph over the original and become debatably the definitive experience. But when we start getting too many remakes prioritized over other titles, or when it seems like we're just getting way too many of them at once, it starts to feel like the industry is running out of ideas or trying to capitalize on nostalgia, or both. And as we know, remakes succeed when they stay true to the original material while adding meaningful improvements. It's about more than just slapping on that coat of paint landlord style. It's about understanding what made the original game special and building upon that. Remakes will fail when they ignore the core of the game, they gloss over meaningful details, when they're rushed, or when they're obvious cash grabs. Remakes can be great. They can revive dead genres, they can remind us why we fell in love with these games in the first place. But they can also be terrible cash grab garbage dressed up in bloom lighting and ray tracing. On one hand, remakes can introduce classic games to fresh new audiences and keep beloved franchises alive. On the other hand, they can stifle creativity and lead to a flood of rehashed content. When they're done right, remakes are a great way to revisit cherished memories and relive them in an even better way. And when they're done wrong, they're a waste of money and feel like a backhanded slap right to the dick of fans everywhere. Obviously, the value of a remake will come down to the individual game and how it's handled. Are we getting a loving restoration or a cheap rush job? That's the question to keep in mind before spending any money on these. Anyway, that's all I've got. I want to hear from you guys though. What do you think about remakes? Are they good for the industry? Drop your opinion on the best and worst remakes that you've played in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!